This is huge. The EU has done a complete 180 on its approach to migration. The EU, once all open arms, refugees welcome, has now decided that they have had enough. They have had enough of completely unsustainable numbers of illegal migrants arriving in Europe and being forced to take them all because of the Refugee Convention of 1951. They are fed up of these horrendous spikes in crimes in their once safe societies, and they are particularly fed up of criminals being not able to be deported because apparently someone who is a rapist can't be sent back to a country where they might be abused for their supposed homosexuality, for example. The EU is finally waking up. They've had enough. We've seen a huge spike in support for the AfD in Germany, for example, where the problem is particularly rife, and maybe the UK will follow in its footsteps. So let's have a look at these plans that have been seen by the Telegraph. This is not the Telegraph, the Times. This is not in place yet. They are drawing up plans. We will see if this comes to fruition and a plan is passed through. But this is a very, very interesting development in the EU's approach to migration. So the article in the Times today says the EU is drawing up a plan to overhaul the post-war Convention on Refugees that prevents countries from rejecting asylum seekers at their borders in what may be one of the biggest shifts in migration policy in decades. I agree, this is a huge, huge shift in approach if they change the Refugee Convention. The article says there's a growing consensus across Europe that the 1951 Refugee Convention, drafted after the Second World War and added to by rulings in the European and EU courts, is no longer fit for purpose. It should be noted that these principles were developed after the end of the Second World War and were characterised by a very different geopolitical situation to that of today, said a diplomatic paper seen by the Times. Exactly, very, very different situation back then to what we have now, where the numbers coming, our countries just cannot cope. We're turning our own countries, once great countries, into failing societies with, as a consequence of this huge burden that we're putting on ourselves, as a consequence of bringing in people who are unvetted, who are undocumented, and people from societies where crime is more common, where their morality isn't as developed as ours is. We had some very, very scary statistics coming out of Italy over the past week or so about the propensity of people from different backgrounds to commit crimes, and I think the figures on rape were the worst of them all. Really, really scary. Some backgrounds with a 15 times more likelihood than Italians to commit rape or to be an alleged rapist. Really, really, really scary stuff. And the EU just cannot cope anymore. They are at breaking point with this issue, both in terms of just the governance of their societies and funding and society cohesion, but also the EU project as a whole. The EU, you are going to have so many countries, desperate to leave the EU like the UK did, if they feel like the EU will not stand up for them, will not stand up for the girls who are at risk in these countries. So really interesting times. And let's have a little look at also the numbers that they're dealing with. I mentioned at the start, more than 1 million last year. Okay, that's asylum requests in the EU, more than 1 million. Okay, in the UK, the highest number of boats coming in a year was about 45,000, and that is enough as it is, and a huge cost to the taxpayer to put them up in hotels whilst we wait for their asylum claims to be processed. But we're not the only ones, and it is worse in some of the other countries in the EU. It's not the case that every single person that turns up at Lampedusa in Italy comes on to the UK. No. They are dealing with some pretty horrendous issues. Places like Germany, they've got to eat a heck of a lot worse than we do. I posted a video the other day of a mother in Ireland who seems to have a heck of a lot worse than we have it in the UK, talking about how her area is now 85% foreign nationals. I don't know how many of those came legally versus illegally, but clearly we've got a problem on our hands here, and the EU are realising that Refugee Convention that is forcing them to keep everybody that turns up who says they are from a dangerous country, it just can't be maintained anymore. Something has to change, as lovely as it would be to rescue everybody in the world who's in a difficult situation, who lives in absolute poverty, who lives in war. You know, there are very, very sadly millions and millions of people that live in those horrible situations. We just can't do it. The EU alone and the UK, we just cannot do it. So let's have a look at what the paper said in this quote here. Recently, there has been an adverse development. Member state societies' ability to host large numbers of migrants is increasingly being put to the test, especially in situations where some migrants do not seek to integrate into the host society, but instead to form separate communities in which norms and rules that deviate from European values may be cultivated, noted the paper. And I think, you know, hosting people when they arrive is becoming quite problematic. We've got all of these in the UK, at least. We've got all of these migrant hotels, and when you we know that the vast majority are young men. There are not very many women and children. So most of the time you've got hotels opening up, often in small rural areas, where a hotel opening up with hundreds and hundreds of people all of a sudden being moved into, say, a tiny little village already as it is, regardless of who they are and how nice they are. It's very difficult for the community to cope with such a drastic change, and just, you know, the facilities and whatnot that are there, the doctor's surgery and whatnot, to cope with such drastic change is difficult. That's hard enough as it is. But when you put mostly men all together in a hotel who are just hanging about, killing time, they're not allowed to work, they don't have a family, they don't have wives and children that they need to care for and entertain and that they can spend time with. It's just a bunch of boys hanging about, okay? Even if it was all British lads, okay? If you put 400 British lads up in a hotel, nothing to do you think they'd get up to no good? Yeah, they probably would. Then take 400 lads from countries with different cultures and different expectations to ours, maybe different views of women. Are they going to get up to no good? Yeah, probably. Regardless of their culture, they're going to get up to no good if you put a load of bored young men together. And we have seen in Dienzanger, one example of many, that we've had guys from the migrant hotel hanging about outside the school gates every day. They're so bored that they've decided to go hang outside the school gates, reportedly taking pictures and videos on their phones of little kids. The police, they didn't want anything to do with it. They said, we can't identify any risk to anybody here, but we've told the migrants to respect cultural differences. Don't know whether they'll listen. But yeah, that is the situation. One of the big parts of these plans that are being drawn up is the big problem that we have with people who come who we know are confirmed to be bad apples because they have been convicted of crimes, yet we still cannot deport them. Okay, it's one thing to say that you speculate that migrants have a greater propensity to commit crimes than normal humans living in that country who are native to that country. But it's another thing to say that people who arrive and then go on to commit horrendous crimes, and I'm not just talking little petty crimes like shoplifting, we have people who are rapists who cannot be deported. You know, it's another thing to be in a situation where you say, someone who's committed all these horrendous crimes and is clearly putting women, for example, at risk in the country, we're just going to have to keep them, we can't get rid of them. You know, we've got people who have been accused. We had a rapist Jamaican who had turned up, who could not be deported because he said that he's actually bisexual, and people might be a bit mean to him in Jamaica if he goes back and he's bisexual, and I'm just like, I don't care. You're a rapist. Go home. I don't care. And this is a problem that we're having not just in England but across the EU. They've got a whole load of criminals and they can't deport them because of the refugee laws, because you're not allowed to send someone back to somewhere that might be dangerous for them. And they know how to play their cards. They know how to trick the system, they say, just like that Jamaican, just, say you're bisexual, say you're gay. Okay, how many, gay Christian converts are there going to be? We had, I can't remember the stats, but the people, migrants who were staying on the Bibby Stockholm, suddenly a whole load of them were all suddenly going to church, claiming that they were Christian converts. I wonder why that was. But anyway, this issue, it's getting out of hand, and clearly people are waking up. And speaking of the issue of mass illegal migration to Europe, tonight we have on Channel 4 the show Go Back to Where You Came From, featuring moi, yours truly. It starts tonight, 9 p.m. on Channel 4. There'll be 4 episodes coming out every Monday. If you're passionate about illegal migration, even if you're not, this show is such a laugh. It is so entertaining. The characters we had, we're all bonkers. We had so much fun. It was absolute chaos. It's very entertaining whilst also informative. You'll start to figure out why are they hopping between countries? Why aren't they stopping at the first country in Europe that they get to? What is going on? I don't think Brits, because we just talk about the channel, the bit between France and the UK, we don't completely get it. This is going to be a fantastic watch. A lot of people have commented saying, oh, it's Channel 4, it will be lefty bollocks. No, it's not. I've seen it, first of all, so I know how it's been edited, and I'm in it. And in fact, 4 out of 6 of the people you see on the screen there are on the anti-immigration side, so it's definitely not short of people with spicy opinions like me. So definitely give that a watch tonight, 9 p.m, Channel 4. Anyway, thank you very much for watching. I'm Chloe Dobbs. Make sure you subscribe to the Reason channel if you haven't already. See you next time.